In the rugged mountains of southwestern British Columbia, not far from some of the most popular recreation areas in Canada, stands a peak that most people have never heard of, but that scientists regard as the most dangerous volcanic region in the entire country. Its name is Mount Meager, and though it has not produced a major eruption in thousands of years, it is far from quiet. This is a mountain that has already shown, in living memory, just how destructive it can be. A mountain whose very rock has been weakened and rotted from within by the heat of the volcanic system beneath it. A mountain that scientists watch with a wary respect. To call it Canada's most dangerous volcano region is not sensationalism, but a sober assessment shared by many who study it. And understanding why reveals a fascinating and sobering story about the hidden power beneath a landscape that looks, on the surface, like nothing more than beautiful wilderness. This is the story of Mount Meager, of what makes it so dangerous, and of why scientists keep such a careful eye on it. But before we go further, an honest and important word. Mount Meager is not erupting, and there is no sign that it is about to. The danger it poses is real, but it is a matter of understanding and preparing for a hazard, not of bracing for an imminent catastrophe. What follows is an explanation of why this mountain earns its fearsome reputation, told with clear eyes and without alarm. Quick honest word before we dive in. A lot of people watch these all the way through, love them, and forget the one small thing that keeps a channel like ours going, hitting subscribe. If you are finding this interesting, take 1 second and subscribe right now. It genuinely matters for us and costs you nothing. And drop your province or country in the comments so we can see who is watching. Alright, let's begin. Where Mount Meager stands to understand the danger, you first have to understand where Mount Meager sits, because its location is a large part of what makes it a concern. The mountain rises in the coast mountains of southwestern British Columbia, in a region of steep peaks, deep valleys, and powerful rivers, north of the busy corridor that runs between Vancouver and the famous resort town of Whistler. This is not the remote, empty far north, but a part of the province that lies within reach of populated areas, recreation destinations, and the routes and rivers that connect communities. While Mount Meager itself stands in rugged and largely uninhabited terrain, the valleys that lead away from it carry the potential effects of its hazards toward places where people live and travel. Mount Meager is not a single tidy cone, but a complex of volcanic peaks, a massif built up by a long history of volcanic activity. And it stands as the northern member of a chain of volcanoes that extends up from the volcanoes of the American Pacific Northwest. This connection places it firmly within the great volcanic belt of Western North America, tied to the same deep forces that fuel the more famous volcanoes to the south. Its setting in the coast mountains, amid steep and unstable terrain shaped by ice and water, combines with its volcanic nature to create a particularly hazardous situation, because it is not only a volcano, but a volcano built of weakened rock perched above valleys that lead toward inhabited areas. This combination of volcanic power, structural weakness, and proximity to human activity is the foundation of its dangerous reputation. It is worth pausing on just how deceptive the setting can be, because to the eye, the region around Mount Meager looks like pure, pristine wilderness, a place of forested slopes, rushing glacial rivers, and snow-capped peaks, the very picture of untouched natural beauty. Nothing about that scenery announces the danger buried within it. And this is part of what makes the mountain so easy to overlook. The hazards are hidden in the chemistry of the rock and the heat below the surface, invisible to the casual observer, and it takes the trained eye of a geologist to read the warning signs written in the altered stone and the venting steam. This gap between the mountain's peaceful appearance and its genuine hazard is one of the reasons that public awareness of Mount Meager has lagged, and one of the reasons that explaining it clearly matters. The eruption that marks it as alive. The first reason Mount Meager is regarded as so significant is that it is the site of the most recent major volcanic eruption known in Canada. A few thousand years ago, the mountain produced a powerful, explosive eruption, an event that sent ash across a wide area and left thick deposits that geologists have studied to piece together what happened. That eruption was a substantial one, the kind of event that, were it to happen today in the same place, would be a major disaster, and its relatively recent occurrence in geologic terms marks Mount Meager as the most recently active of Canada's great volcanoes. a mountain that erupted powerfully a few thousand years ago, is not an extinct relic, but a dormant volcano. One whose volcanic system remains capable, over the long spans of geologic time, of future activity. This eruptive history is what earns Mount Meager its place at the top of Canada's list of volcanic concerns, because it demonstrates that the mountain is a genuine, capable volcano, rather than a mere geologic curiosity. The deposits from that ancient eruption tell a story of real volcanic violence, of ash and debris, and the transformation of the landscape, and they serve as a reminder of what the mountain has done before, and could, in principle, do again. It is important to keep the timescale in mind, because thousands of years is a very long time by human reckoning, and the odds of an eruption in any given year are extremely low. But in the world of volcanoes, an eruption a few thousand years ago is recent, a sign of a system that is sleeping rather than dead, and it is this that places Mount Meager squarely in the category of volcanoes that warrant serious attention and study. The rock that falls apart here, we come to what may be the most important and distinctive source of Mount Meager's danger. And it is not the threat of an eruption, but something more immediate and more insidious. The mountain is falling apart. The volcanic heat and fluids that have coursed through Mount Meager over its long history have chemically altered and weakened its rock, turning what should be solid stone into weak, crumbling, clay-rich material that is prone to collapse. This is a common feature of volcanoes, whose interiors are cooked and rotted by the acids and heat of their volcanic systems. But at Mount Meager, it has combined with the steepness of the terrain and the forces of ice and water to create a mountain that is dangerously unstable, prone to giving way in enormous landslides. These landslides are the most active and immediate hazard that Mount Meager poses, and they can occur without any eruption at all, triggered simply by the collapse of the weakened rock under the pull of gravity, often aided by water from melting ice and heavy rain. When a large mass of this rotten rock lets go, it can rush down the mountain's flanks as a massive torrent of rock, mud, and debris. A landslide or debris flow of tremendous size and destructive power. This is a hazard that does not wait for the rare event of an eruption, but is present in the ordinary course of the mountain's existence, a continual danger tied to the very structure of the peak. It is this proneness to catastrophic collapse, more than the distant possibility of an eruption, that makes Mount Meager an active and present concern, a mountain that is quite literally coming apart and sending its debris toward the valleys below. Here is something I would genuinely love to know, and it takes 10 seconds. Does it surprise you that a mountain can be this dangerous without even erupting, just by falling apart? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because your reactions help us shape what we cover next, and I read every reply. Okay, back to the mountain. The landslide that proved the danger. The danger of Mount Meager is not merely theoretical, because in recent years, the mountain delivered a dramatic demonstration of exactly what it is capable of, in the form of one of the largest landslides in Canadian history. A colossal mass of the mountain's weakened rock gave way and rushed down into the valley below, a torrent of debris of staggering size that swept down the drainage, scouring the landscape and coming to rest in a vast deposit that reshaped the valley floor. It was an event of enormous scale, a real-world illustration of the destructive power locked within the unstable slopes of the volcano, and it happened in our own time, not in some distant geologic past. What made this event so instructive and so sobering was not only its size, but its implications. Because a landslide of that magnitude, had it occurred in a slightly different way, or been directed toward inhabited areas, could have been catastrophic. There was concern, in the aftermath, about the way such a landslide can dam a river with its debris, creating a temporary blockage that can later fail and release a sudden flood downstream. A secondary hazard that can extend the danger far beyond the landslide itself and strike valleys that the original collapse never reached, sometimes hours or days after the initial event when people may have assumed the worst was over. The event demonstrated that Mount Meager's instability is not a distant abstraction, but an active reality, that the mountain can and does unleash enormous flows of debris, and that the communities and infrastructure downstream have a genuine stake in understanding and monitoring this hazard. It was, in effect, the mountain showing its hand, a warning written in rock and mud about the power it holds. The event also gave scientists an invaluable opportunity to study a major volcanic landslide in detail. To understand how and why the rock failed, how far and how fast the debris traveled, and what conditions had set the stage for the collapse. That knowledge feeds directly into the effort to anticipate future events, because the more precisely researchers understand what happened, the better they can judge which slopes are most likely to give way next, and what warning signs might precede such a failure. In this way, even a destructive event becomes a source of understanding, a hard lesson that helps protect against the next one. The threat that flows downstream. To understand why Mount Meager's instability matters so much, you have to follow the path that its landslides and debris flows would take. Because the danger does not stay on the mountain, but travels down the valleys toward places where people live. The drainages that lead away from Mount Meager connect, eventually, to the river valleys and communities of the region, and a sufficiently large debris flow, or the flood from a failed landslide dam, could travel a considerable distance downstream, threatening settlements, roads, bridges, and infrastructure along the way. This is the essential reason that a volcano in a largely uninhabited area can still pose a serious risk to people. The hazard is mobile, capable of flowing far from its source and reaching into inhabited valleys. The communities and recreation areas of the region, along with the routes that connect them, lie within the potential reach of the largest flows that Mount Meager could produce, and this is what transforms the mountain's instability from a remote curiosity into a matter of public safety. The danger is not that lava would engulf a town, but that a wall of mud and debris, or a sudden flood released when a debris dam gives way, could rush down the valley with little warning. Understanding the paths these flows would take, mapping the areas at risk, and developing the means to detect and warn of such events are central to managing the hazard. And they are a major focus of the scientific attention that Mount Meager receives. The threat that flows downstream is the human face of the mountain's danger. The reason that its restlessness is not just a scientific curiosity, but a real consideration for the people of the region. Quick pause, because this is worth sharing. If you are finding this fascinating, tap the like button. It really does help the video reach more curious people. And if you have family or friends in British Columbia or anywhere in the Pacific Northwest, share this with them, because it is genuinely useful to understand what is out there. One like, one share to someone you care about, and let's keep going. The heat that never left beneath all of these hazards lies the fundamental fact that Mount Meager's volcanic system is still warm, still connected to a source of heat deep below, and this ongoing heat is both the root of the danger and, intriguingly, a potential resource. Scientists studying the mountain have documented signs of this persistent heat, including places where hot gases and steam escape from the ground, evidence that the volcanic system is still active in the geologic sense, still venting the breath of the molten depths. This heat is what has weakened the mountain's rock over the ages, cooking and altering it into the unstable material that gives way in landslides, and it is a sign that the volcano, though sleeping, is not dead. The same heat that makes Mount Meager dangerous also represents a significant potential source of geothermal energy, and the mountain has long been of interest to those exploring the possibility of harnessing the Earth's heat for clean power. In this way, the volcanic system that poses a hazard also offers an opportunity, and the study of Mount Meager encompasses not only its dangers, but its potential benefits. The persistence of the heat is a reminder that the mountain remains an active geologic system, that the forces which built it and which threaten to tear it down are still at work beneath the surface, and that understanding this heat is central to understanding both the risks and the resources that the mountain holds. The heat that never left is the beating heart of Mount Meager, the source of its danger, its instability, and its promise, and it is a constant presence beneath the deceptively quiet slopes. Why scientists keep watch, given all of this? It is no surprise that Mount Meager receives careful scientific attention, and the effort to study and monitor the mountain has grown as its hazards have become better understood. Scientists work to map the areas at risk from its landslides and debris flows, to understand the behavior of its volcanic system, to measure the gases and heat it releases, and to develop the means to detect the early signs of a major collapse or, in the far less likely event, of renewed volcanic activity. The goal is to close the gap in knowledge and monitoring that has historically left Canada's volcanoes less watched than those of more obviously active regions, and to ensure that the communities downstream have as much warning and protection as possible. The challenge is considerable because the mountain is remote and rugged, its hazards are complex, and the resources devoted to volcano monitoring in Canada have historically been limited. But the recognition of Mount Meager as the country's most dangerous volcanic region has helped drive a renewed commitment to understanding and watching it. And the work continues to build a clearer picture of the mountain and its behavior. This vigilance is the appropriate response to a hazard of this kind, neither panic nor neglect, but careful, ongoing attention, the patient work of understanding a dangerous natural system so that its risks can be managed. Scientists keep watch on Mount Meager, not because disaster is imminent, but because the mountain is genuinely dangerous over the long term, and because the price of ignoring such a hazard could one day be high. Their watchfulness is a form of quiet protection, a way of ensuring that the mountain's next move, whenever and whatever it may be, does not catch anyone by surprise. All right, I know, second time I am bringing this up, feel free to sigh at me. But quickly, if you have made it this deep into a video about a Canadian volcano of all things, you are exactly the kind of curious person this channel is made for, and a lot of you who watch have not subscribed yet. That one tap genuinely tips the scales for a small channel. No guilt, just a grateful ask. That is the last time, promise. Let's finish, keeping the danger in perspective. Having laid out all the reasons Mount Meager is considered Canada's most dangerous volcanic region, it is important to place that danger in its proper perspective, because a reputation as the most dangerous volcano in a country can easily be misunderstood. Mount Meager's danger is real, but it is a long-term, low-probability, high-consequence kind of danger, the sort that calls for preparation and vigilance rather than fear. An eruption is not expected in any foreseeable time frame, and while its landslides are a more active hazard, even they are occasional events separated by long stretches of quiet. The mountain is not a ticking bomb waiting to go off, but a hazardous natural feature whose risks unfold gradually over long periods and can be managed through careful understanding and steady monitoring. It is also worth remembering that the recognition of Mount Meager's danger is, in a sense, good news, because a hazard that is understood and watched is far less threatening than one that is ignored. The scientific attention the mountain now receives, the mapping of its hazards, the monitoring of its behavior, and the growing awareness of its risks all serve to reduce the chance that it could cause harm without warning. Knowledge transforms a hidden danger into a managed one, and the story of Mount Meager is increasingly a story of that transformation, of a mountain whose risks are being brought into the light and addressed. To live in the region near Mount Meager today is not to live in dread, but to live alongside a powerful natural feature that is being carefully understood, and that understanding is the best protection there is. The sleeping giant of the coast mountains, when we step back and take in the whole picture of Mount Meager, we see a mountain that embodies, more completely than any other in Canada, the country's hidden volcanic nature and the real, if remote, hazards it holds. Here is a volcano that erupted powerfully in the geologic recent past, that is built of rock rotted and weakened by its own volcanic heat, that has already unleashed one of the largest landslides in the nation's history, that threatens the valleys downstream with its collapses and debris flows, and that still vents the warm breath of its living volcanic system. It is, in every sense, Canada's most dangerous volcanic region, a title it earns not through any single dramatic threat, but through the combination of its eruptive history, its structural instability, its persistent heat, and its proximity to the places where people live and travel. Yet the deeper lesson of Mount Meager is not one of fear, but of respect and understanding, an appreciation of the powerful forces that shape even the quiet corners of the world, and of the value of the science that reveals and watches them. The mountain is a reminder that the landscapes we think of as simply scenic can hold hidden power, that the earth is restless even where it appears most still, and that wisdom lies in understanding and preparing for the hazards of the world rather than ignoring or fearing them. Mount Meager watches over the coast mountains as it has for countless ages, a sleeping giant of weakened stone and buried fire, and now, at last, we are learning to watch it in return. Not with dread, but with the careful, respectful attention that such a mountain deserves. In that mutual watching lies the truest safety, and the story of Mount Meager becomes, in the end, a story of how knowledge and vigilance